I wish people saw their own innocence and sweetness. It's interesting because as me, I very much see people as these multi-layered beings, where what's in the very front most often is like protector parts of a personality structure. So what most people are met with is this kind of savvy harshness. And what's underneath that for the human being is a level of preciousness that is very difficult to describe and that most people just don't witness. We witness it when we've got infants in our hands, but we don't often witness it in adults. It's not until you see them in very specific settings, like, when they're playing in snow, or, when somebody does something genuinely so kind that they're completely taken aback by it, and you start to see this upwelling of joy and pleasure and being cared for. I wish that people saw that sort of innocent preciousness.
Welcome to part 2 of this beautiful conversation with Teal Swan. If you are here, then that means you probably listened to the first half of this conversation and something struck a chord in you, something sparked curiosity, interest, and you are ready to dive fully in and go even deeper as we did in this second half. This part of the conversation was much more, I would say, practical in the way of really looking into the structures that society has created for itself up to this point, and what Teal is seeing out into the future in regards to education, relationship, self-mastery, the economic system, things that can really be practical. Because if you are here and you're tuning into this type of information, that means you are a leader in your own right, in your own community, and you are wanting to change a lot of different things that are no longer serving humanity. So you are tuning into conversations like these because with this information that you gather, you will then discern what is true for you and then co-create for yourself, for your community, for your loved ones. And it's really special that we get to be doing this together. So it's an honor for me to lead this ship in a way that can bring the most value to you. This conversation was very, very packed. So I know that you will take away different things, and I'm really curious to know what struck a chord in this half of the conversation. Leave it in the comments. Make sure you smash that, hit that subscribe button for this channel that we can grow together, bring on different minds, and really learn together in a unique way. This platform is created for you. This platform is a way that we can open our minds and hearts to new ideas. So I'm excited to have you here. And without further ado, we bring you part 2 with Teal Swan on Just Tap In. Much love. You're a modern way shower, Teal. And I feel like the more people I also talk to in my generation are opening up or have already opened up psychically, extrasensory perception, all of it. So, I know that you didn't grow up in the best conditions for that. How can the new generations come in and how can the parents of today and tomorrow raise their children in an awareness that we're connected much more than just the 5 senses?
Don't take your kids who are talking about seeing things straight to a psychiatrist. That's like probably we're losing all of our like soothsayers to medications stuffed down throats in these horrible, hospital-like settings. I feel like what we need to do as, parents who have got kids who are coming in this way is to really understand that every child that is born to a family is the progress of that family line. So it's very important to work with the very unique gifts, essentially, that child has and the direction that child is trying to lead us and the whole family line with it. At the same time as set ourselves up as advocates and allies for what is. We're not trying to shape and mold that child, right? It's about looking at the child in a different way. We're not trying to shape and mold the child into what we want it to become so that it's successful in this environment. That's the way it has been. The way it needs to be now is, okay, I've brought this gift, right, that is not currently unwrapped. I've brought this gift into the world, and I would like to teach it about the way that the world is, at the same time as I understand that my job is to help this being sort of peel these petals back to reveal what it is meant to be within this world. And that's something that you don't need to even make happen. I genuinely am a very firm believer that if you start to follow a child's general aptitudes and interests, they take you to exactly what they were meant to serve in terms of a function within the overall picture of this world. So I see actually that education is going to change a lot, because that is definitely the case for each child. Education is going to go in the direction of a person being really celebrated for uniquely what they are meant to offer here. And it doesn't matter whether that is, to be a leader, or to be an artist, or, to be a plumber. There's going to be this deep valuing of the unique being that is in front of you and what they seem to be designed for and where they seem to be designed to fit in. So I'm excited for that, because obviously we've been in this existence for so long where there's already a preconceived idea of what type of person a child should be. And we see them like this lump of clay that we need to shape and mold. And that is just so wrong. If we don't see them that way, then all of education changes. We start to teach to aptitudes. We obviously have to break up the way that our education system runs, because we can't stuff 35 children under the nose of one person and be like, have fun unwrapping them all. Like, it's not going to work that way, So these school systems are going to be a lot less like prisons and more like areas where a person is unveiled.
Yeah, I was fortunate enough to wake up in the second year of college, and I was telling you before, I was going to class watching Teal Swan videos, but I also started to question a lot, why was I in university, right? And what I came to the insight is that in large part, this university, this institution, was treating its students, was treating me as their product to then the companies that they're going to sell us to, because that's what the companies need. They need people who can do this, and that. And we just follow along, and we're getting like trained in this like hamster wheel of here's where you need to go.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, I like the fact that the younger generations are starting to change this. And for a while here, it's going to kind of feel like stick it to the man. But after a while, when I feel like the younger generations are stepping into power, they're going to be like, wait, I actually have to take positive ownership for what I want this to look like and how it didn't work before and what I think it needs to look like now. And there's real potential for positive change there when positive ownership is developed within the younger younger generations.
Maybe they're a new race.
Sometimes it feels like that.
Let's get into that positive ownership. I've heard you speak upon that in terms of relationships and how the masculine and feminine play a part in that. How do you see that developing? Well, we can go into that, and also in education in specific, how younger generations are taking positive ownership of their own education, their own future.
Okay, so to take radical ownership of something, right, is to really you're taking full responsibility for it, right? And in that responsibility piece, when I'm watching people relative to their own education, what they're essentially doing is wiping the slate clean. They're saying, you know what? My education is up to me. It's not just about me stepping into the door and deciding to sort of follow along with somebody else's idea of what I need to be doing or what it is that I need to know. I want to pursue what interests me. So this takes a person down this rabbit hole where every bit of information they own and they integrate. It's not just like, which is how it has been for so long when people really aren't taking an ownership over their own learning and their own desires for their future, which is ultimately what the education system is supposed to be. So when they're taking that radical ownership and they're following what it is that truly lights them up, they're actually creating things from a completely different space. When a human being creates from intrinsic motive versus extrinsic motive, the things that are created are, I mean, you can't even compare the two. It's like another stratosphere, you know. It's like, you know, it's like somebody creating, you know, Tesla, right? Versus being like, yeah, I went into a car company and then I climbed the ladder and now I'm a manager and now like it's like you literally it's a different game, okay? It's a totally different game. So the more ownership that a person takes over their own education, the more they're playing this completely radical different game where they're using the energy that is inherent within them to actually bend the time-space reality to them. It changes everything that a person is matched to in terms of their future and career. Very big deal, right? But you know, when I'm talking about ownership and things like that, I'm more interested in like the concept of ownership of other. Because I think this takes us down a really provocative path. And it's a path that I really enjoy provoking.
Go there.
Yeah, so people have a really negative relationship with ownership. And I want this to change. I thought about this a lot, by the way. I thought about whether I should come up with a different word because the word ownership has been so spoiled. The reason that I chose not to go for a different word is because the frequency of the word ownership and the concept around it is just too powerful, honestly. And so what I'm hoping is that we can establish a different relationship with that concept of ownership, a positive one, rather than just considering the word poisoned. Okay, so positive ownership. When I take ownership of something in the positive sense, I'm taking responsibility for that thing. I'm basically, it's like a level of, it's a form of conscious attachment. I'm essentially saying that I'm attached to the outcome of this thing. I'm attached to the well-being of this thing. And I'm very much aware that anything that I do affects this thing. So to conceptualize the concept of ownership, let's imagine that somebody decides that they own a car, right? In the positive sense of the word ownership, that I'm going to keep this car in the best possible state. And the only way that I can do that is to be attuned enough to that car that I know exactly what to do that's right for the car. So in this, if you start to think about this, there's some safety mechanisms for the car built into the concept of positive ownership. Negative ownership, it's my car, I can do whatever I want with it. I can take a crowbar and bash in the windows, who cares, it's mine. That's negative ownership, right? In positive ownership, you could never do that because it implies a form of attachment. It implies I can't bash in the windows without it hurting me or reflecting on me as a terrible owner.
And you care about it.
Exactly. So when somebody is in a positive ownership state with something else, that thing is innately safe. Like all the fears we have around ownership are null and void. They don't exist. Because you could not feel like a good owner, and you could not actually be okay if that thing came to harm. And you can't be wrong. Otherwise, you're a terrible owner. Like, that's negative ownership. You can't be wrong. The number one thing that's the most important thing in positive ownership is understanding what it is that you own. Right? If I don't understand let's go back to the car. If I've got the car and the car is going, I need oil. And I'm like, I don't know what that means. I'm not going to put energy into it. Okay, I've just failed there. So that's not positive ownership. What people are desperate for, especially in relationships, is positive ownership. But because they've got such a negative relationship with that word, they're like, no. Ownership means I don't get free will. Ownership means I'm going to get damaged. Ownership means the other person gets to do whatever they want with me and I'm going to suffer. And I'm like, no, that's a negative ownership.
So what happens then if the owner of the car is a man and the car is a woman?
Love that. That's my favorite dynamic. Okay, so what do you want to know about that? Because that's the best dynamic of all. And in fact, I spend so much of my career trying to help people in relationships to step into that dynamic because it's the number one that women want, actually.
Yeah.
So what do you want to know about that one? You want me to just
flow with it?
All right. So let's say that a man is taking positive ownership of a woman in his life. First thing he's going to do is understand everything there is to understand about that woman. And that's a process that's never going to end. But it's like the level of effort that a guy puts into understanding her has to be through the roof. Why? Because every single woman is different. Once he learns everything he can, right, about her, that will dictate the way that he behaves around her. So learning that this woman doesn't necessarily enjoy flowers when I've made a mistake, right, versus this one does, that would obviously change whether you do or don't give flowers, right? There's a deep level of connection with her emotional state, and you can't really feel amazing about yourself in that ownership dynamic with a female if she's not doing okay. So already there's this drive towards keeping that woman in a very good state. And there's also in this, especially for men, there can be a really, big hit of self-esteem in how well she is doing. So it's like when you're seeing the woman in your life thriving and you're watching her really happy with you, that's your like, yeah, I did that.
I did that.
In that ownership dynamic there, especially between men and women, there's a big wide open door for leadership dynamics, which are pretty sexy for females, right? Because when the male is more in the leadership position in a relationship, females are able to more step into their receptive energy. And receptive energy is where female creativity flows from, in fact. So you start to see the element that is female come to life when the masculine is actually in that state of positive ownership. I could just go on all day about this one. I love this one.
I have one. You just mentioned it briefly there, but why is the state of surrendering for a female one of the most powerful things in the universe?
When a female surrenders, she goes into this state of open, receptive softness. Now, in a state of open, receptive softness, the element of female is in its deepest form of power. It's a very expansive energy. It's hard to describe to a person, especially a man, if they've never been in the presence of that energy. But like that very, very powerful, open, receptive softness, like basically is what brings forth life through to the physical. So the whole reason that anything exists in the physical is down to that energy. Like literally, a woman is like a wellspring. It sort of puts like a queen bee to shame, with their level of productivity. When a woman is truly in that flow, it is like the creative energies are just like, and like she's literally a wellspring of nourishment for everybody that comes into contact with her, emotionally, physically, and everything else. Like a woman can't help but give. She can't. It's not possible. You put her in that energy, and it's just like, I mean, it's like trying to drink out of a fire hose,
When have you felt the most in that state?
Me?
Yeah.
I think within the context of tribe for me. I'll be honest with you, I have not had a real great, I've had taste. I have not had a real great experience with being in a relationship with a guy who can put me in that state. So the closest that I've got to that is definitely being within a tribal setting. It's been a little disappointing, honestly, in a romantic sense, because I get into a relationship with males and then it's like, they've got it for an hour and then it's dropped and then it's back to, and then it's got it for another 2 days and then drop. So, woo, yeah, it hasn't gone real well for me.
And
of course, my chosen career makes this more difficult, right?
Why?
So, I'm more difficult to contain than most women are.
That has to do with, I heard you talk about, that has to do with the power, the female power.
Yeah. I have a hell of a lot of power, but I also have a lot of masculine traits. Some of those I came in with by virtue of ancestral stuff, but part of that is definitely adaptations. I'm a woman who has a very strong masculine shield, so that doesn't really help in relationships, but neither does being in a leadership position where nobody cares who you are because the only person that matters in the room is me, right? I'm like the Everest of trying to contain females, right? So I don't think, even though I know these dynamics and really love going into these dynamics and I'm naturally actually a sub in the bedroom, it's still very difficult, I notice. It's what the feedback I get is well, there's a difference between trying to drive a Ferrari and trying to drive a Ford Taurus. It's a different experience, right? I'm difficult. So, yeah.
And I mean, this is probably different for everyone, but this seems like a very sacred decision of who you decide to give ownership to. How does one go about, filtering what is the best thing for the person and for, the union of where do we give our ownership to? Who do we give our ownership to in that sense?
Oh, that's a whole ball of wax. There's no way that I could just sit here and be like, oh, this is your prescription for all people.
Yeah.
I mean, the most important thing, if I was going to be more general about this, would be it's very important to think about compatibility as the most important element of a relationship. Compatibility really is something that revolves around what you consider to be the most important, right? So whatever one person considers to be the most important, and part of that is down to the person's deepest needs, right? That's going to dictate who you will or will not get into constant conflict with. Because it's really easy to own somebody when it's easier to own somebody when you got that sort of compatibility element going on. When you don't, it's like, well, how am I supposed to own you wanting what it is that you want when it's going to damage me to give that to you? Right? So that's when we start to get into zero-sum games in relationships. So putting a lot of energy into trying to get on the same page with people in terms of what they want to offer and what you're wanting to receive, what you want your relationships to be based off of, what values you hold in life, they better line up, because if they don't, you're going to prioritize different things in a moment. And believe me, you're going to get in a fight. So yeah, I mean, it's all about assessing compatibility. Now, I have not created yet an exact science for assessing compatibility, especially because you have to somehow account for people don't know themselves. That's been honestly the hardest thing when I've been working with people. Even in my own life, trying to assess compatibility, the hardest part is that people don't know themselves. You'll be getting these conversations where it'll be like, yes, 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 yes. 2 months in, never mind. What? You literally said that was the thing for you. Yeah, but I changed my mind. Oh, great. Yeah, but so we can't, this is why, obviously, one of the things I'm talking about with people is that it is so important to develop self-awareness. Like, it's not a luxury that people have if they want to end up in compatible relationships or end up in the right life for themselves. The more you know yourself, the easier it is to, like you say, make that decision. This is the person that's correct to give that positive ownership to. Aside from saying all that, I would definitely say that you want to give ownership to somebody who is actively, not verbally, actively demonstrating that they are considering your best interest when they are doing things. And when there's a rupture, they are quickly coming back to resolve it. I think those two qualities essentially is somebody saying to you, I want to make this a safe relationship. Okay, then. That's probably a good likelihood that you can step into that and be in a dynamic where you're safe to hand off some level of ownership.
In your upper back, you have a tattoo of a seal of self-mastery. And I really want to hone in on that topic of self-mastery, because the more we gain mastery over ourselves, the better we can be in relationship with the external world. So why did you decide to commit yourself to self-mastery in this lifetime?
I don't see there as being any other life to be living. Like, I know that sounds like ridiculous because people are like, what? Having fun is why to be here. But I'm one of those people who's constantly needing to question everything. Why is everything the way that it is? Should it be that way? And that includes everything about myself. And I realized, I got this tattoo when I was on a sports team, right? And it was the reason that I really aligned with this is that it didn't matter how much I was learning about the sport itself. It didn't matter how much fitness I had. It didn't matter. Nothing mattered. Everything I tried to do physically didn't matter. It was like, why did I just do that at the last minute? Why did I just fall at the last minute? Why did that happen? You can't point to mechanics at that point. And they would always come back to okay, and there's that pattern in me. And then there's that belief in me. And it was always something here. So I started to realize that the mastery of anything externally is the mastery of self. Period. The end. That's it. There is no other picture to look at, right? Which is where all the best coaches from all the best sports end up. They're like, what the hell is the difference between this person and that person? This one's even better than they are physically. Why? So That's why I got this, is because of that. I really saw very deeply through sports this connection between the way that things turn out and your level of self-mastery.
Hmm.
But it's not just limited to sports. Sports is just like this wonderful little, it's like a way of condensing the universal laws in a way where it's very provable, So it just became more and more applicable the more that I got out of sports and went into a whole new direction. I was like, oh, it's even more true. Oh, look, it's true again. So now it's like anytime I'm trying to master anything, it's like, all right, I got to look at me.
Another tattoo. I relate to you a lot in that because I grew up playing basketball, and for me as well, one of my highest priorities is that excellence. And I'm really curious because for someone that strives for excellence like yourself, where do you draw the line between having to have something perfect, if perfection is an illusory concept of the mind, versus what we believe is excellent to us? Where do you draw the line there?
Whether I'm hurting myself. That's it. There's no other line. I love excellence. You know that, right?
Yeah.
I just love excellence. Because I just see, perfectionism is driven by the idea that you're not good enough. So underneath that is kind of like the simmering cesspool of low self-esteem. It's not necessarily the same thing when you've got a value of excellence. The value of excellence is like a drive to keep pushing yourself. It's a rage to master. It's knowing that you want to push the envelope as far as you possibly can, and the only way you can do that is to aim for perfection. But it doesn't really matter to somebody whose value is excellence whether you reach it or not. You're never going to stop reaching for it. Because it's like, if I aim for perfection, even if I get like 2 centimeters below perfection, I'm still gone further than I would have if I aimed somewhere else. And that feeling of mastery, the feeling of like going for excellence in the body feels incredible when you've got that value. I love it. I actually love that tension. It's total eustress versus distress.
Do you see that young generations are having issues with striving for excellence?
Yes. Yeah, because I don't think they have a good enough reason. I don't think that the younger generations have fallen in love with the concept of excellence. The relationship they've had with having to do something well is not necessarily a positive one. The thing is, I'm sitting here talking to you and you're an athlete. Like, in the realm of athletics, it's very easy to see, oh wait, I put my energy into trying to perfect this and I get a result. So many people in the younger generations, they're not necessarily on sports teams like this. They're not really seeing a result for the energy that they're putting in. Okay, well, that very quickly makes you not want to put in energy anymore. It makes you very quickly not want to strive towards something anymore. So yeah, I think the younger generations have a horrible relationship with doing things well and excellence. I can't tell you how many times, like, this is me on my phone, right? On Instagram, coming across these like much younger, people in their 20s that are like, you know what my boss asked me the other day? Like, why did you put in such a crappy, why did you do such a crappy result? Well, pay me more and I'll put in a better result. I'm like, oh my God. I don't understand this concept of like not being attached to what it is that you produce. Like, if you're going to put me in a job as a janitor, that's going to be the cleanest floor you've ever seen in your life. Why? Because I'm attached to the outcome of whatever I put my energy into. I'm going to own it. So yeah, and I see that sort of quality disappearing. That quality was very much there actually for my grandparents, would have been the silent generation. It is not there for the younger generations right now.
Yeah, I came across a post the other day that said, and I was like, I love that. It said, slow success builds character, fast success builds ego. And
yeah.
I mean, I'm seeing that a lot within my own generation, because, even I mentioned about the basketball part. I grew up, that's where I think the role of role models comes in, because my person to strive to, the one that I would learn the most, was Kobe Bryant in the basketball court. And okay. I think a lot of his mentality around, he was obsessed with his craft. And I guess just having that example of someone that literally worked his ass off for years and got to the pinnacle of his success. It wasn't he put out a little, like a dance on his phone and then all of a sudden became Kobe Bryant. Like, he was forged in the fire. I love this topic, and I think just shedding light on it, it will go a long way for everyone listening. Where do you see yourself right now with your craft, and self-mastery? Where does that lie?
I swear, the closer you get to self-mastery, the further away you feel. You're just like, okay, it's never going to happen. Like, it's just, right now with that, it's like I've slowed down a little bit. What I mean by that is that I very much had a goal in mind for a lot of years, and I'm done with it. It's a very deep, and like, there's a difference between a mental knowing and a like deep visceral knowing. There's a deep visceral knowing that this is something that never ends. The process of self-mastery and what I'm trying to master about myself is just going to shift, over the course of my life. So now, because there's no sort of finish line to get to, I'm able to sort of, dance in a more compelling way with whatever it is I'm trying to work on with myself. The mastery of my craft is right now so focused on mastering resistance because of obviously the truths that I've seen within the universe at large, not accounting for the resistance within itself, and also the fact that I also did not think that people would resist their own healing. And then I got into this line of work and was like, wait a minute, that's like the thing you have to work. That's like the thing. If people don't have a resistance to their healing, they're healed. So it's resistance I'm dealing with. That's my life. Oh God, without knowing it, I just got into the business of resistance. So I'm trying to master resistance, which means mastering my own. And that is a bite to chew, I'll tell you. Yeah.
Yeah, I learned a lot about resistance from this book, The War of Art by Stephen Pressfield, and how that's intrinsically linked with your own creation, with your creativity and your craft. I'm seeing behind you the paintings that you've created. How has painting helped you overcome resistance?
I don't know that it has. I feel kind of like a little cheater because, I'm a seriously, naturally, like, artistic and creative person, but these paintings is just like, it's just the same as somebody going outside and like drawing a moose that's in front of them. I'm literally just copying the stuff that I'm seeing in front of me, knowing that if I do that, they can be sort of used allopathically in somebody's healing. I don't know that my art really has helped me master resistance. My writing has. I guess that's another form of art. My writing has. Oh my gosh.
Talk about that.
I've been an obsessive journaler since I was about 6. It's ridiculous. Like, I have hundreds of journals at this point. And when I'm writing, it is bizarre. It is like it clicks everything into place. Click, 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 click. So obviously that has definitely helped me in terms of self-mastery, because it's like the more that I'm mentally organizing whatever it is going on with me, it definitely feels like the faster this process goes of self-awareness and therefore making the right decisions and things like that. Also, it uncorks my whole body in flow. It's interesting, is like I've noticed even that when I sit down to write, it's like all the bodily processes start to kick into the gear. Like, let's say I lost my appetite. If I started writing, I would gain it again. I've noticed that. Oh, I love writing.
Does it give you the same type of energy that doing your events in person does? Or is that a whole different thing?
It appeals to a different aspect of me. I guess I'm flying my Gemini flag right now, I guess. Because, like, when I'm on stage, it very much appeals to this leadership energy and the performer in me, which I love being in front of a whole audience of people and working with that and joking with them and things like that. The writing is accessing a much deeper part of myself, I think. It always hurts me. It's funny because, like, people sometimes write me and they're like, I'd much rather just have a conversation with you than write back and forth. And I always feel my heart sink because I'm like, but much more of me is in what I write. So, yeah. Are
you working on any new books right now?
Yeah. Yeah, it's good, yes, but like the research phase of this new book that I'm working on is going to take the length of a Bible, so I'm not going to be able to get it done as fast as I want to.
Is it about sexuality? Like we opened
No,
up with? No, that's a whole
no.
different book, the whole different Bible.
Yeah. I'm also working on some e-courses right now, which are taking the majority of my time.
Which ones are you most excited about?
Completion process. So I created the completion process, right, which started out as this book, which turned into a whole like way of training people to help people to overcome trauma. But I've since seen this wide open door for a lot of people who are wanting a more in-person type dynamic with me, but where I can't be in person with each person. So I'm like, wait a minute. In the realm of e-courses, there's a whole lot of people who would love for me to lead them through the like how to do completion process. And then for there to be this opportunity in conjunction with this e-course for them to be getting on webinars where they can ask questions about stuff that they get stuck on and things like that, which are like, this is something that's not available with a book. You know, if you go and you rent a book from somewhere like Barnes and Noble, I guess that's like the olden days. Okay. If you get a book online,
Amazon.
and you, if you get a book online and you listen to it, it's not like if you have a question, you can write the author, you know, hey dude, I need to know about this in paragraph 3. But with an e-course, there's opportunities for anybody who's taken that e-course to get on for these regular back and forths with me that I can get onto. And that, of course, improves the way that I'm conveying my material also. So I'm pretty excited about that one. Because I want people to feel like somebody's there for them also in the process of healing. I know what it's like to go through extreme like trauma healing. It's a really vulnerable space. And to feel like you're sort of reading a book and by yourself in a corner somewhere is very different than having somebody, you know, even if it's a video screen being like, hello, let me tell you about fragmentation in the psyche. Let me tell you about what to do. This is your new exercise, you know. It's a different experience and I think it's a better one. So
Yeah,
that's the one
way more personal.
Yeah.
Yeah. One of the last rabbit holes I wanted to deep dive into is the new earth. We've heard that thrown around way too much, but I want to dissect it down to what it really means for Teal Swan. I heard you talk about the qualities of the new earth, which are renovation, restoration, restructuring. Do you want to walk us through that process of what those 3 qualities mean for the future of Gaia, for the future of Earth?
I really should just do an entire video on this because it's like I'm gonna feel very ill-equipped when I'm just like sitting here having to answer things quickly to do a justice to this idea. But a lot of these old concepts upon which our society is built, which we just accept, like the concept that the way that we're going to establish justice is through the concept of punishment and reward, for example, will be thrown out the window entirely. So it's going to be more a concept of rehabilitation. We're no longer going to be seeing bad guys and good guys. We're going to be seeing people who need assistance to step into what their actual potential always was. And therefore, we have to change the entire justice system then. So what we want to look for when we're looking at the redesign of the new earth is that when we have a different idea, that idea dictates the different structure which we create, and that, of course, dictates the way it looks physically. So obviously, if the justice system no longer looks like punishment and reward and it looks more like rehabilitation, then we are building rehabilitation centers for people who, you know, commit crimes and things like that. A rehabilitation center looks very different than a jail cell. So all of a sudden the buildings themselves have to change. And the people that we're employing there has to change, right? Because we can no longer have punitive people working with people who need rehabilitation. So you see that kind of chain? Mm-hmm. So when we're looking at the new earth, it's like we can take any idea that's going to change and then just trace it out in that chain fashion for how that's going to make it look in the physical. So we did that one. Let's look at another one. All right. So relationships are no longer going to be based off of marriage. Marriage is disappearing. Kiss it goodbye. Okay. With marriage disappearing, then all of a sudden, wait a minute. What's the structure of relationships? The entire structure of relationships has been based on marriage. Okay. So if you throw marriage out the window, what is the new structure of relationship based off of? Symbiosis. Oh no, that could look really weird. Because for one person, maybe that symbiosis looks like living with 6 people and having sex with them all. Maybe for another person, it looks like, finding a person who you really like living with and moving them in with mom and dad. Maybe for another person, it looks like, it looks like a lot of things. So right now, with that type of an idea in mind, all of a sudden people are getting much more creative, right? With their relationships. They're going to be designing them uniquely for themselves. Well, now even the structure of the way that a house is created doesn't make sense anymore. Because in most house designs, you've got the master bedroom for mom and dad. That's marriage, right?
Listen up, architects. Listen up.
Yeah, oh, yeah. If I was an architect right now, looking at what I'm looking at in the future, I'd be doing backflips. I'd be like, this is so exciting. Yeah, because not only are architects going to be creating with this type of relationship structure shift in mind, they're going to be creating with the idea of what are the best, resources that are symbiotic with the rest of the environment. Now the locations we're building and the materials we're building with, all of it is changing. So it's pretty exciting in that way. So the structure of house design is going to change in conjunction with the way that relationships change. That obviously the tax laws are going to have to change. So taxes are going to be something that's on, because taxes right now is about, wait a minute, we know how to deal with merit. What are we going to do now if people are in relationships with this many people, Because right now it's like they've got a chokehold on the way that we create relationships because everything in the system itself is set up for marriage.
Huh.
So the system will have to change in that way. Oh God, what else? So education, we talked about the fact that education, the entire idea of this New Earth education is that we're taking a child and we're unpacking who that child really is. We're not forming them, we're unpacking them. So in conjunction with that, what is the best environment for unpacking a child? Who are the best people for that process? Are we going to expose them just to one teacher? Or wait a minute, are we going to bring in different influences for this child to unpack themselves? What types of learning materials are we going to put around them? What should the environment look like? Should this be kids sitting in desks? Do kids get unpacked the best sitting in desks? No. Okay, so then you've got a whole change in that structure. Wait a minute, now we can't test them according to the same rules because only some kids do good at tests. Right? So other kids fail. Why? Because that's not the way that they do life. That's not their aptitude. So we can't test them in the same way. Okay, well now tests are out the window. How do we tell whether one school's working and the other school's not working? We are right back to the drawing boards, right? But you can see how each one of these idea shifts creates a shift in the entire structure, and then that creates a shift in terms of the way that it shows up in the physical. You see why I'd feel like I can't do it justice? Because I could probably sit here for an entire year and be like, let's trace it out. This change is going to happen. That means this, that means this, that means this. This is what the new Earth looks like.
It's a whole different timeline that you're tapping into.
Oh, yeah. That's if things go good and we don't kill ourselves with a nuclear weapon first.
Do you see that within the timeline as well?
There's a very, very, very big potential for us to do ourselves in. When we're looking at like the collapse of civilizations in the past, we can't really point to one thing. It'd be easier if we could point to one thing that makes it so that civilizations collapse, period, the end. But when we look back in time, we see things like warfare, we see things like genocide, we see things like disease, issues in the food supply, even things like drought. We see things like internal political changes that collapse everything, mass migrations, right? We can point to all kinds of things. And right now, we are flirting with a great many of them. The fact that we are flirting with war being one of them. Now, when I say flirting with war, we're actually already in it. So in the future, they will literally say that it started all the way back around when George Bush Jr. was in presidency in the United States. So we're already in it. This major Third World War, which is for the most part a silent war, most people are not seeing it yet. We're flirting with food system collapse. Big time. Like, if people knew how much danger we're in right now with food supply collapse, cultural shifts, obviously. We're in the middle of this. It doesn't take a genius to see this. Most people hit 2020 and felt like, wait a minute, this is backwards universe. So we're going through cultural shifts. We're also going through political changes. And when I'm pointing to a lot of the dangers within the collapse of our society. And number one is that we can't have relationships. That's at the root of almost everything that's threatening us right now.
Is
What
that
I mean by that is that
the fertility
we can't-
crisis?
No, that's just a whole other
That's
thing.
a whole other.
No, we can't have relationships being that we, as a human race, we're super narcissistic. We're super stuck in narcissism. We keep playing zero-sum games, and we can't seem to figure out how to create a win-win for each other and anything else that's a part of this web of life. So our inability to not be able to have relationships where we set up a win-win, and it's kind of a zero-sum game instead, we're seeing this playing out in terms of climate catastrophe. We're seeing this play out in terms of war. We're seeing this play out in terms of the way that politics is functioning and the way that companies are running, where they're running to the detriment of the very people upon whom they stand. So it's our inability to have relationships, which is the threat, which could play out in any number of ways.
We won't open the door on the fertility crisis yet. That'll be for another conversation. Teal, we end every show with a segment called the Final Trio, which are rapid fire. Not really rapid. You can answer them in any way that you want. But before that, you mentioned a couple of new projects that you have going on. Where would you send people to connect with you further?
Well, I mean, I think the amalgamation of everything that I'm doing is on my website. So if you just remember my name, Teal Swan, and go to tealswan.com, I've got everything in one place. Poetry, paintings, events, videos, everything. But for the people who are really wanting to go down a rabbit hole, my YouTube is where you should go to. So you just go to YouTube, type in Teal Swan, have fun. You're going to be there for a very long time, because I've been talking about every subject under the sun for like years and years and years, decades. So
out of all the videos that you have out on your YouTube channel, do you have a certain affinity to one of them?
I do. The Lesson of Lucifer and Christ.
Ooh,
It's funny because I really do like doing non-esoteric stuff, but that esoteric video is my favorite because I'm like, this is the one. If people understand this, they get everything.
I will watch that right after this, and we will link that video in the show notes. For the final trio, the first two questions are personalized to the guest, and the last one we ask at the end of every show. So the first one is, what is something that you experience or see that you wish all people experienced or saw?
I wish people saw their own innocence and sweetness. It's interesting because as me, I very much see people as these multi-layered beings, where what's in the very front most often is like protector parts of a personality structure. So what most people are met with is this kind of savvy harshness. And what's underneath that for the human being is a level of preciousness that is very difficult to describe and that most people just don't witness. We witness it when we've got infants in our hands, but we don't often witness it in adults. It's not until you see them in very specific settings, like, when they're playing in snow, or, when somebody does something genuinely so kind that they're completely taken aback by it, and you start to see this upwelling of joy and pleasure and being cared for. I wish that people saw that sort of innocent preciousness in people. And in fact, it's one of the things that I feel like is most necessary for 2024. 2024 is an interesting year this year because there's going to be so much of the opposite energy of what I've been describing here in terms of what I wish people saw. And so we need to flood each other with the awareness that this is really what is at our root and at our hearts. It's not like that which we see in a child vanishes in an adult. It's still there. It's just buried.
Innocence and pleasure.
Preciousness.
What does your heart say when you tap in to your love for humanity?
What does my heart say? What does my heart say when I tap in for my love? Wow, that's nobody's ever asked me that question. It's interesting because what comes up intuitively is you are wonder. Humanity was created to conceptualize of source, conceptualize of the unconceptualizable. It's basically, it's like a manifestation of the mind of source. And the mind of source is deeply curious. The mind of source is in a state of awe.
Yeah. That was one of the things that really got me on this journey, is returning to my wonder and returning to my awe. And yeah, that's what keeps me going. So I appreciate that. That really hit me. Thank you. The last question we call the final trio, the time capsule question. Okay. I was about to do the whole final trio again, but we call it the time capsule question. Okay. And it requires us to travel essentially out a bit into the future, around 15 or 20 years. And the reason I chose out those dates is because that is when more of the younger generations are going to be stepping into leadership positions around the world. And you were given the opportunity to have a time capsule. And all of these leaders, right, they come together, the leaders of the new earth, if we want to call them that way, and they see all these time capsules laid out for them with different names. And you have one just for you, to these leaders, and you could put anything that you wanted inside of the time capsule. It doesn't have to be anything physical. It could be physical, but it could be non-physical, a transmission, a message, maybe an object. But essentially whatever is in that time capsule is going to help these leaders and give them guidance toward what is to come. What is to come for us, for humanity. What would you include in that time capsule?
You are going to keep me awake at night. This is going to be my 2:00 in the morning where I'm like, I should have said that.
Well, just write to me after. We'll include it.
I would definitely find a way to put every video I've ever created on a disc in there. God, that just dated me, didn't it?
A hard drive.
Something they can actually use with the technology in the future. Do you know what is funny is I would create a collection of every process that I can possibly think of, both mine and other people's. I wouldn't make it just about my processes. Every process I've ever found that I genuinely believe makes people completely aware of themselves, especially their own shadows. Especially processes also that bring people towards seeing the root of whatever it is that they're doing. Why do I say this? Because everyone, no matter what they get into, is into that for both positive reasons and shadow reasons. And you can't get away from this. It's not a thing that you're going to find somebody who's, say, became an actor because of only positive reasons. There's always trauma that goes into it. And wherever there's trauma that goes into it, there's room for some sketchy territory as to what somebody does with their position. When it comes to leadership positions, this is especially true and especially dangerous. For example, let's say that you've got a president who was never able to please his father.
Sounds familiar.
His entire political career may just be a way of proving himself. Okay, well, that's very dangerous. If proving yourself matters more than the well-being of the people who are following you, then that is a very dangerous game. I would want that person to be as aware of their trauma of never being able to prove themselves, be able to work through that trauma, and be able to have their eye on that shadow of theirs if they're going to be in a leadership position. So I would literally put a whole collection of every process that I can where they can't avoid seeing this stuff about themselves, and thus would be more safe in their position.
Yeah.
Oh, God.
Sprinkle in some mushrooms in there.
No, I was just going to go. I was like, wait a minute. Every shamanic medicine known to man. Yeah, I would put shamanic medicines in there for sure. Because that's just like a really fast way of being like, ready to wake up? Bam. I wish I could condense a shaman. Let's create a Horcrux. Let's go find the best shaman in existence. create a Horcrux and be like, here,
Put him in a hologram.
rub it when you're ready. Yeah, I would like that. And I would love to be able to condense history for them, because you don't understand where you're going unless you understand history. But of course, that would have to be a more accurate history, right? Because history was written by the winners, i.e. not very accurate. Okay, I think that's my answer, but I am going to wake up at 2 a.m. Thank you.
Well, if you have more to add, we definitely have to do this again. Teal,
Okay.
I really, really enjoyed getting to know you and your beautiful wisdom that you're imparting on us. You're a very special soul, so I really appreciate all your time here and just for giving without expecting anything in return. So I appreciate you so much.
Thank you.
Till next time.